The modern professional world often conflates two distinct skills, assuming that someone who is highly analytical is automatically a strong critical thinker. Analytical thinking organizes information. It asks how a system operates and seeks internal coherence, arranging data points so they fit together logically without contradiction. Critical thinking serves a different function entirely. It steps outside the system to evaluate its validity, ethics, and underlying assumptions, asking not how the system works, but whether it actually makes sense to use it at all. This creates an uncomfortable reality. An argument can be perfectly rational and structurally sound, yet remain entirely unreasonable. Cognitive psychologists have long noted that human thought is naturally biased. Left unmonitored, our minds default to egocentrism and sociocentrism, prioritizing our own perspectives and social group norms over objective truth. Because of this, critical thinking is an unnatural, heavily disciplined process. Without it, highly intelligent people use flawless logic to confidently make deeply flawed decisions. Consider the cognitive scientist and author Steven Pinker. He is frequently celebrated for his high-level analytical precision and data organization. Pinker uses clean prose and clear data visualizations to plot a historical trajectory of moral and technological progress, largely attributing this advancement to Western civilization. Analytically, this argument is airtight. The historical data points are robustly cited and plotted, creating a coherent, upward-trending narrative. But applying a critical thinking lens to that same dataset, the coherence falters. We must ask what voices were left out and what cultural biases framed the selection of that timeline. As an analytical exercise, the structure holds. As a critical one, it buckles under the weight of its own unexamined assumptions. Selecting data strictly to build a coherent narrative creates a blind spot. True critical thought requires you to evaluate the framework that dictated which data was selected to begin with. The necessity to audit our own thinking is not a modern corporate invention. It is a discipline that stretches back thousands of years. In ancient Greece, Socrates utilized a method of probing questioning that consistently proved highly confident people could rarely justify their claims to knowledge rationally. Fast forward to 1815, and the exact phrase critical thinking appears in British literary critique, before gradually expanding into a broader cognitive discipline over the next century. By the early 20th century, pragmatist philosopher John Dewey cemented the modern concept under the term reflective thinking. Dewey defined this as a process where a person uses rationality not merely to absorb or process information, but to actively develop a critique of the subject matter itself. The bedrock of this tradition is clear. The goal is not acquiring more facts. The goal is building an internal intellectual mechanism to actively interrogate how we process those facts. In 1941, educational researcher Edward Glaser formalized this mechanism, attempting to structurally map out the precise elements required for critical thought. He proposed a three-part framework. The first two elements are a foundational knowledge of logical inquiry, paired with the active disposition or attitude to thoughtfully consider problems. The third requirement is the actual skill to apply those logical methods to real-world scenarios. Decades later, in 1987, Michael Scriven and Richard Paul presented a definition that was endorsed by the National Council for Excellence in Critical Thinking. They defined it as the intellectually disciplined process of actively conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information. The recurring theme across these models is effort. Simply memorizing logical fallacies offers no protection without the rigorous, active disposition to turn that logic inward on your own deeply held beliefs. To operationalize this effort, Richard Paul and Linda Elder developed a definitive architecture for dissecting human reasoning. Their framework posits that all reasoning, without exception, starts with a specific purpose and seeks to answer a central question. From that foundation, the reasoning relies on unstated assumptions, and it is constructed from a distinct point of view. It then gathers information, the raw data and facts, and processes that data through overarching concepts and theories. Finally, by drawing inferences from that data, the reasoning creates a roof of conclusions, which inevitably carry real-world implications and consequences. To audit this structure, Paul and Elder require us to apply universal intellectual standards, metrics like clarity, accuracy, precision, relevance, depth, breadth, and fairness to every single component. If we fail to force our information through this rigid, formal architecture, our daily reasoning easily collapses under the weight of unexamined cognitive biases. We can move this theoretical architecture of the mind out of the classroom and deploy it as practical interventions in the modern workplace. One of the most effective exercises is known as assumption hunting. This involves deliberately deconstructing a decision to isolate the unstated axioms beneath it. Once identified, you subject each assumption to a stress test, questioning its absolute truth. This forces you past shallow, surface-level problem solving. Another highly effective tool is known as reverse thinking, which is a method used to deliberately disrupt our established mental patterns. Instead of asking how to succeed, you ask what specific actions would guarantee failure. Inverting the problem bypasses our sociocentric biases, often uncovering non-obvious solutions that traditional analysis misses entirely. Applying these exercises regularly transforms the static academic framework of critical thought into a functional daily cognitive workout. When we revisit the Paul Elder framework, we shouldn't view it as a static building, but as a continuous processing system where data is constantly tested, refined, and filtered into logical output. As educator Kirby Carmichael defined it, critical thinking is an inward-directed process. Its primary function is not necessarily to solve external business problems or to win debates. The true core intent is maximizing the rationality of the thinker. It serves as a robust self-monitoring defense mechanism against deliberate manipulation, hidden cognitive bias, and widespread misinformation. Shoddy, unchecked thinking carries enormous costs, draining financial resources and degrading our overall quality of life. By actively mastering these formal architectural frameworks and relentlessly hunting down all of our own hidden cognitive assumptions, you stop merely organizing coherent data. You begin the actual work of evaluating reality.